Hey, everybody. We're restarting this live. And let's see. Let me see if I can add Burton Chatelin. There he is. Invite. There we go. Can you hear me, Burton? Yeah. Exciting. Hey, everybody. We're about to start talking about our new project. Hey, we got 130 people. That's exciting. With me is Burton Chatelin Jr., who is my partner on this project. Well, he's going to have to convince me that he's any good at it first. So, you know, that's how this is going to go. So, everybody, if you're piling in, if you could just follow at the 600 movie, we're trying to get that account to 1,000 followers, so we can just do lives from that account. And in exchange for following, it's going to be great. You're going to be able to see behind the scenes stuff, unboxing equipment. We're going to try to be as open and honest as we can about our workflow, just the planning, the thought behind it. So this is going to be our first video. We're going to do these once a week, and we're going to tell you a bunch of insider info about making documentaries like a pro, and how not to spend too much money on them. That's really the biggest thing. I mean, I've talked to a bunch of people who've made documentaries in the past, and a lot of people try to do docs as like one of their first projects in the business because it seems like it's easier to do than a feature, which I don't think is true. I think it's actually kind of harder to do than a feature. So we are going to be sharing as much as we can about the process of making this documentary, which we're calling the 600. This is just a placeholder title. So don't beat me over the head about how that's a terrible and marketable title yet. But it's just a placeholder title. It's one we've had for years, and it's really good. Eventually, we'll come up with a title that sort of makes it a little more marketable, gives you some insight into what it is. So, hey, it's producer Daniel. Welcome, Daniel. Okay, so we got a little list of things to go down our hit list here. All right, so the a little background first. You'll this project has been going on for a very long time. Burton has been filming things and working on it really since before I met him, which is like years and years ago. So don't worry, Elena, you did not miss anything. We're just getting started. So yeah, basically, this project is something that he's been filming for a very long time, and then we started talking about it. He brought me in on it. When was that, Burton? Maybe 10 years ago, 8 years ago. Yeah. So at that time, it was just this idea that, like, we wanted to make a documentary, and Burton's been wanting to make this basically, for a large portion of his life. And so we recently got funding for it. And so we have a plan, and we are going to bring you along for the ride, as much of it as you'd like to pay attention to. Welcome. It's going to be a great time. So, Burton, do you want to just talk a little bit about what you do in the film industry, what your career arc has been? So, hold on, Burton. Elena is saying she cannot hear you. So, you can hear me okay, and I can hear you, Burton. So, I don't know if that's just you, Elena. Okay, continue, Burton. Sorry. Okay, so Burton, they're saying nobody can hear you. Let me boot you as a guest and see if I can add you as a host. Oh, so they're saying they can hear you, but your volume is very low, Burton, which I don't know
Um,
why that is.
okay. It's weird.
Here, let me boot you as a guest and add you as a host. Let me see if that helps.
Okay.
Da, 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 da. Disconnect with Burtworthy. Exciting. Hosts. All right. Let's see if I can find. I cannot see you among the hosts, Burton. Do you have 1,000 followers? Let's see. You should be able to. Should be able to join. I wonder if you have to go live. There we go. Invite Burtworthy to go live together. Thanks, Elf.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can everybody else hear Burton or no?
Can everyone hear me? Test, test, test. Test, test, testing.
Oh, Daniel's saying yes. Okay, that's good. All right. All right. So, yeah. So, Burton, you essentially work in post in the film industry, right? And you are a colorist now?
Yeah. I work for a major post-production company. I'm hoping that the strike does not happen for a long time, but if it does, then I'll be able to work on this documentary full time, which is going to be fun time. So I'm at a crossroads right now. Yeah.
Exciting. Yeah. Ah, the strike. Uh, about to find out what's going to happen with that. So, yeah. So, and if you don't know me, I'm Micah Haley. I'm a film producer and a screenwriter and blah blah blah, and do things. And Burton and I have known each
Things
other a
and
long
stuff.
time, and is a really incredibly. He's probably one of the most talented people I've met in the film industry in my whole time in it or whatever. So we work together whenever possible. Okay, so yeah, so let's just talk about our to dos. This is just going to be a lot of us updating you on what we're doing, our thought process, and then if you have any questions, we're happy to answer those as well. Okay, so the first thing we did today was we just got social media set up. We sort of had like a decision about whether or not we were going to do social media. It's not always a thing you need to do, want to do for a movie. In fact, in general, for a feature film, I recommend staying off social media and keeping your movie completely off the internet. You don't want a website, you don't want it on IMDb, you don't want it on social media. But this is a little different because of the type of project that it is, and I think there is going to be value in building interest in building an audience. And also, we just want it seems like the perfect project for me to sort of do this with, where we're fully in control of it. There's no other partners, there's no other politics, there's no distributor involved yet. So it's a complete indie that we're financing independently, and we there are basically no politics involved. So I can tell you guys whatever I want without any repercussion, right? So yeah, so we set up social media today. We set up TikTok. We still have to go refresh some of our other accounts. Have an older we have an older Twitter and Facebook account and Instagram account. We're going to refresh, and it's going to be a great time. It's going to be a great time. So we'll go refresh those. And what can you expect to see on social media? Well, it's going to be a lot of process. It's going to be what we're doing, and us sort of sharing it with you. So if we are scanning photos or scanning video or buying equipment or selling equipment or figuring out, I'm going to share my methodology for how I'm approaching the writing slash structuring of the documentary. You're going to see all the problems we're going through there. I'm sure there will be many. But we do have sort of an idea, an initial approach, and it's going to be great. It's super fun. So all that's set up. And yeah, so that's just kind of how we're going to approach these lives. They're not going to be super well planned. We're going to have a couple of notes written that we want to hit, and we're just going to give you an update. We're going to try to do them weekly on Sundays. And we're doing it a little earlier today, but it might end up being Sunday afternoon or Sunday night activity. I don't know, but we're going to try to do them weekly if you want to pay attention, and just throw a reminder on your calendar. And then we're also going to upload them to YouTube, I guess, if you want to go back and look at the archive. But the goal is just to pull back the curtain and show you how film professionals would approach a project like this, whether it's a documentary or it's a no budget feature. It's very no money is wasted, probably a lot of time is wasted, and we're just putting it together without a lot of oversight and without a lot of interference. So we're just sort of free to essentially be creative on it and get through that part of it as much as we can. Elena is saying that she is in the UK, so we need to do them earlier. So yeah, maybe we end up doing it midday in the US, like 12 PT or something like that. It might allow a few more people to
Speaking of the
jump
UK, this is what I'm dealing with right now.
in.
I have to get a converter cable for a camera, but
Yeah, so Bertie, do you want to tell them about that? Do you want to tell them why, even though we're in the United States, do you want to tell them why you have that UK electric adapter?
so um so I mean, that kind of to give you a little intro, the name the 600 refers to, you know, 6+ years ago when I called LA before I moved to LA. Um, and basically I called LA and I was like, hey, can someone give me a quote for transferring and digitizing these films? And I kept calling around, and they were like, "Oh, so what's an estimate for the amount of footage that you have?" And I was like, uh, I did like a general rough calculation, and I was like about 600 hours, and they were like, "What? Really?" So Micah just kind of, put that as our working title. So fast forward to now, I'm close to being done transferring the videos. But I'm getting into issues with the high 8 slash digital 8 format footage. Um, so during that time, it was around the time of the analog to digital switch. The industry was just changing into digital. So the tapes that I have, they were recorded high 8 on an analog tape. So the playback on the equipment that I have, and I have about 3 different decks, the playback is just absolutely awful. It's just, there's pixelization and random lines that come across the image, and that's because the video heads inside of the camera that actually spin the tape aren't spinning at the right speed. So um, basically, I just kind of I looked online for different models of cameras on eBay, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is the exact model that I shot this with." And I was like, "Well, that's gonna, increase the probability of better playback digitally." So I found the camera, and of course, there was only one camera, that the only and best model I found on eBay, and it was in the UK. So I got it. I got it in the mail 2 days ago, and I was like, "Oh, the power cable situation is going to be great." So today, I think Amazon's delivering a UK to US power cable converter. So we'll see. I'm pretty excited. Um, hopefully it plays back. I mean, you never know. It could be bad camera, dirty camera. I mean, it's just the type of things that you go through when you're doing everything yourself and you're trying to save money. Which kind of dovetails into what Micah said about documentaries. I mean, for a feature film, things are a lot more planned out and, as much as possible. But with documentaries, I mean, you have all this different source media. You have to scan things. You got to make sure you scan them at the proper, DPI, dots per inch, different tape formats. And, it can get really um, crazy as far as like media management is concerned. So, um, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and
going to be a fun time.
this is one of our obstacles, right? Was like however many years this was ago, we sat down and there was all this footage, and we were like, that's a big obstacle. It's going to take like years just to watch it, right? And a lot of it was on older media that I didn't even have the capability of to watch. It's on like mini DV and high eight and all this stuff. Some of it's on actual film. So, I
Clean
don't have a
tape.
yeah, I don't have a player for all that. So how do I watch it? How do we watch it? It's all got to be scanned first, and then there's so much of it. I mean, Burton remembers filming it and remembers some of the events, but like, even he's probably forgotten a good deal of what's actually on the tapes. So we had this huge sort of barrier to cross of just being able to scan the footage or intake the footage in a way that is at a professional, quality of what's the terminology there? A professional scan or a professional digitization.
Yeah, yeah,
So, we didn't want to, digitize it just to work on, and then also have to go pay to to pay somebody else to scan everything professionally afterwards. So Burton, I mean, one of our like total wins on this project is I don't really have to worry about any of that. Burton's like a post production pro and is very meticulous and has it's having him in the pocket like a trained editor colorist who deals with stuff like this every day at work. It's been such a huge win. I don't know if I would approach this I don't know if I would approach this if Burton wasn't involved with it, right? So he kind of has all those answers, the tech answers that would be major obstacles for me. He kind of has the answers already. So
Elena asked what resolution. It's 640 by 480. Absolutely awful. So
yeah,
that's something that kind of inherently saves us money for storage to a certain extent because I mean it's just so tiny. I mean, if I share a clip with Micah, even on iMessage, it's just immediate. It's as if I'm sending him a gift because now we're able to shoot 4K with our iPhones, so it's just like
yeah.
such
I
a
mean,
small file.
this stuff is just so resolution, but it still looks like good. You know, I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
there's certain limitations like the just the camera limitations, but yeah. So Elena's asking what the content is. We're going to intentionally be kind of vague about that for a while, but in general, I can tell you it's like stuff from Burton's life. So it's stuff he's filmed throughout his life, and we're going to be sort of light on plot details, story details, character details. You are going to meet some people. We are going to share some clips along the way. So Elena asked, are they home movies? In some cases, yes, but a lot of it is really documentary footage that Burton has been filming like his whole life. So he even when it was an event that involved his family or involved him at age 12 or 13 or whatever, he was filming it in order to make a documentary at that age. So this is literally something he's been sort of filming his whole life, and then we're gonna start putting together. So so just to dive in a little deeper, Burton. maybe you make a TikTok about this to upload to the 600 TikTok, but can you just explain why you are just now buying this camera to convert this tape? Talk about trying to convert it in other ways and the obstacles that you ran into that sort of stopped you from being able to digitize it with another deck.
Yeah, so the deck that I think I bought it probably 6 or 7 years ago from eBay. That I Yeah, that I got for, I mean, they're pretty expensive. Just because there's so little of them in the world like left and actually functioning. Um, uh, so I had two decks from Sony that, were about yay big, and um, basically those devices are rated to play back both video 8, which is analog 8 millimeter footage, and not 8 millimeter film. Um, it's like a Sony Handycam 8 millimeter format, um, and they're also rated to play high 8 slash digital 8, which is the digital content that's digitized onto analog tape. Um, and basically, when I started to play back that footage, um, it just would play back fine in the beginning, and then there would sort of kind of be drifting, which, with these older decks, they're supposed to play back the videos correctly, but, it could be their age, where the actual motors just aren't what they used to be mechanically. And if they're not playing back at the perfect speed, you'll start to get, these weird pixel lines across the screen. And it's kind of like um, if you watch the beginning of Bosch Legacy, the intro to Bosch Legacy, it kind of looks like that, like the beginning title animation. Um, it's just kind of like it's hard to describe. It's kind of like a weird digital pixel effect, where like parts of the screen are moving slower. So I was like, oh well, that's got to be playback speed, because when you play a VHS tape, um, you'll get a lot of noise in the image, and you'll get lines in the image, and that could be dirt on the video head, or which is why I have that cleaning tape right there that I just showed you. Or it could be, a lack of a TBC, which is a time-based corrector. So that basically constantly tells the video heads at what speed to play back. Like, I guess it checks the speed at which they're playing back to play back the tape correctly. Um,
So what was the problem you were running into that made you buy this camera? Like, what do you think was going wrong with the deck that it wouldn't intake this
um,
footage?
I think I think it's because through wear and tear on different models, like different models shoot at slightly different speeds. It was just a crazy time for that format, um, and I didn't shoot it with the camera that I tried playing it back with, which is actually this camera. I did not shoot it with this beast right here. Um, so this was from later on. It was released, quite later on
So
in time.
you'd shot it with a certain camera back in the day, and you were trying to record it by playing it on a camera that was like newer than what you shot it on, but in the same model line. Is that right?
Yeah, but also another thing that was happening, because I didn't know what I was doing at 12 years old. I didn't know all these technical details until the internet came around. But there's different speeds that you can shoot at, and see, I don't know if you can see this, but I'm going to cover up this tape. So basically, on the tapes, they would have these little check boxes that say, LP, SP, EP. So what that is, SP is standard play, so that's, you know, 30 minutes typically on the 8 millimeter tape. Then LP is long play, and then EP is extended play. Back then, people that didn't know what they're doing, like 12-year-olds or whoever else, um, they were like, "Oh, I could just shoot in EP mode and get 120 minutes of footage. Oh my God, this is great!" But what happens there is that the tape spins at a slightly slower speed to get to allow you to record longer. But what happens there is that you increase playback errors later on because it's past that standard speed at which the video heads are spinning. So, I'll pop in a tape and I'll start playing it and I'm like, okay, that's when I recorded in EP mode, and it's just a matter of it's just trial and error, to be honest with you, because you just got to get the right deck. You got to buy a deck. If it doesn't play your back correctly, you have to buy a different deck. You have to research, kind of around what time period it was
So it might
released.
not be playing back at like exactly the same speed
Yeah, like
as the
if
original
it's off a
device.
little bit, it'll just be kind of ghosty and pixelized and completely unusable,
Yeah.
which is very frustrating. Because I'm like, oh, I'm almost done, and then you play back a tape where I'm like, oh, this is a great video to capture. I'm so excited, and then what's weird is that it'll play back correctly, and then 10 minutes in, I go to make a coffee or something, I come back, and then all of a sudden it'll start drifting. Um, so I mean, I'm pretty hopeful. I mean, if this doesn't work, to be honest with you, we're gonna have to get it professionally transferred because I'm very frustrated. um, so we may get another post company to transfer it. I don't know. I mean, depending on the cost. But I know, in their hands, it'll be done correctly. It's just, I mean, this is just to save money, because we could have very well have just paid, you know, thousands of dollars to have this all done. But then, I figured digitizing the videos at the same time as I'm logging them. So I'm looking at the video most of the time and I'm just typing in a spreadsheet, what I'm seeing. That way, Micah knows what's on the tape. That's way I know what's on the tape. Instead of, digitizing it and then later on having to watch it again. So I'm kind of like, okay, this is like a simultaneous process. I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone. Um, it's a lot of work. It really is. It really is a lot of work.
Yeah, it's an insane amount of work, and the only option you have other than this is to pay, and the cost could be 20, 30 grand. I mean, it's a lot of different formats. It's a lot of media. It's photos. I think we're up to what, 7 or 8 different formats, recording formats at this point.
Uh, that's 7, yeah. I mean, even video CDs. Like I have a video CD from 2008 or something, which even back then I was like, what's happening here? I thought DVD was kind of over with.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, there's like a YouTube um, video, like source video that, we had to capture. And I mean, it's just a lot of, and I'm constantly trying to figure out what, like if a video is playing and I know that photos were taken during that time, even in the notes, I'm writing photos exist for this event, just to have it there because you can't have too much metadata. I mean, you just can't. I mean, it's super important in the film industry, in the professional filmmaking world. I mean, metadata is just priceless to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for a documentary.
Oh
So
yeah,
yeah. yeah, that's just one of the sort of tech problems we've had to overcome. And, the goal is just to try to keep costs low as much as you can. I mean, I can tell you the number one problem I see in the film industry, in the narrative world, uh, and in the doc world, which I'm like less in, is people just make their movies for too much money. Like, they don't understand what the value of the movie is. And so, like, I talked to somebody the other day that is like halfway through their documentary, and they told me the budget was, they're trying to raise money to finish it. And so they were talking to me through a referral, and I was just like, just give me a prelim budget and I can go through and tell you what you're spending too much on, what you're spending too little on, how other investors are going to react. And, to give you an idea, like, most documentaries are made for between 150 and $500,000. They're not these big. They do have multi-million dollar docs, but there aren't many of them, and most of them are made for really like under $500,000. And these guys, like, their budget was like 800 grand, and I was like, guys, you don't want to make your documentary for that, because the likelihood that you're going to get your money back is so low. It was just really so low, and they were under a couple of misconceptions. They thought that they had heard from somebody that you have to earn all your money in the production budget because you're not going to earn anything else afterwards, right? Which is not true at all. So I understand where that info comes from, and in certain scenarios, that is good advice. But in a documentary that you're self-funding or funding with sort of a friends and family round, that is not a good thing to do. You want to actually make it for as little money as you can, but still producing it at professional standards. So it's definitely something that you have to spend some money on, but 800,000 is a lot of money. Like, you've really got to have this unicorn project that becomes the best documentary of the year to sort of start earning that money back, or you need to be an established documentarian who is regularly selling to HBO and has a relationship and is pulling in a higher value, right? So if you were thinking about making a doc, you definitely want to make it for less than 500 grand. I know of some documentaries that have been made for, say, 20 or 30 grand and gotten worldwide distribution. And, that's one of the things about documentaries is they're all different. The costs with each are very different. And, one documentary you could make for 10 grand, another documentary could cost, 500. So it just sort of depends. But in any case, you always want to try to make it for as little as possible and optimize for what you actually are going to need in the documentary at the end of the day, what you're going to need to sell and deliver it to a distributor. Like, that's really your goal. And you're sort of working back cost wise from there. And so, yeah, part of the good thing about Burton working in post and being able to handle this transfers is not only are these tapes like his babies, that he really cares about, would like lose his mind if they got destroyed in a fire or something. But he also has the technical skill to look at the raw footage after it's transferred and say, okay, this is like professional quality. We can take this and up-res it or do whatever and put it into the final film, right? I think there's a question here I want to add. Thank you for the gift, Majin Black. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Thank you so much. And Elena asks, are you documenting this process for the final movie as well? So, no, this is completely adjacent. None of these talks or lives or anything are going to make it into the final. This is just purely behind the scenes for y'all to learn about the process. And we may include some of it as like extras, but none of it's going to be in the actual feature itself. So, yeah, so that's sort of our approach. Okay, so let's see. I don't want to keep you all day. Let's go on. So, yeah, we explained the 600 name. Raising money. We've talked to people over the years to raise money, and it just has taken a while. It is difficult to raise money for documentaries. Like, they are very risky. They're much riskier than features, right? So and there's a lot of bad info out there. The financial template for one documentary doesn't necessarily work for another, and it's just a field where you can't really take a model for a movie and apply it to anything else. Whereas you could take a model for like a $1 million feature film and take that financial model and do a very similar feature film for that same amount of money. Docs don't really work like that, and people frequently spend too much money on them, and they really have a hard time getting that money back for a variety of reasons. But it's definitely a field where you want to try to spend as little as possible on it. And another thing about just getting a documentary financed versus a feature is, documentaries have none of the safety mechanisms that feature films have. So you can't bond a documentary. You can't. I mean, you can get insurance, but like, there isn't, like, the biggest thing is there isn't like the very predictable process of creating a budget and a schedule and saying, okay, this is going to be 25 days, and then scheduling the 25 days, and then you can establish the base value of the movie with cast, by casting certain people that have certain sales value. They have all these things that just sort of allow me as like a producer financier to look at other people's projects and be like, okay, I sort of know how this is going to go. And if we invest in it, the money's going to be out for 12 to 16 months. And, this is the API. Why? It really is sort of a predictable process, unless COVID or something hits. But documentaries are very different. Some documentaries are filmed all in one day. Concert documentaries are one that comes to mind there. And then some documentaries take 5 years, 10 years, and they change shape. They change, subject. There's just a lot of stuff that goes on, and it's not a straightforward process where you know where the finish line is. So they're difficult to finance, kind of for that reason. And there aren't many outfits that specialize in financing documentaries. There are a few that do this, but in general, there aren't that many, and it's just a weird time to be in the documentary space from everybody I've talked to who works in it more consistently. So, yeah, Elena asked she's asking about the process of digitizing. So, if what your question is, if I understand you, Elena, it's you're asking, like, are we digitizing footage that is going to be used in the documentary? And the answer is yes. This is how the vast majority of the footage is going to be digitized, is going to make it in. It's, the finished, documentary feature, we expect it to be a feature, is going to be probably 90%, 95%, archival footage that we are going to transfer and use in the final doc. And then the rest of it's going to be interviews. Probably we'll do some interviews with some of the people involved. So let me know if that answers your question. What's the premise of the doc, the story? So yeah, we are being a little vague on that in the beginning. And it is a little biographical, I can tell you that. But is Burton's experience of digitizing going to be revealed in the doc? Not so much that specifically, but at some point, it will become apparent that he does this sort of for a living. So, yeah, so that is a little bit a part of it. But, the thing about this doc is, like, the thing that I look at for any project I'm involved with personally is, like, what makes this special, right? Like, what's the point of getting involved with this? Is Nick Cage doing his first Western? That's a good reason to do it. Is the story just incredible, right? Is the story unique? Is it funded? Is it, what is the thing that distinguishes this, And I've been talking to other documentary people, just asking what they're getting for their documentaries, like how much they're spending on it, how much they're getting paid, and et cetera. But a lot of them will come back and tell me like, oh well, I only got a $20,000. I only sold mine for $20,000. Or I only sold mine for 30,000, and the doc market is terrible. And then I go look at some footage from the documentary that they sold for that amount, and it's like, oh well, this is just another run of the mill music documentary about a band that nobody's ever heard of. It's just like, or it's like a doc about like your whatever your favorite place in town, or something that's special to you but doesn't necessarily have any importance to other people. And there's just a lot of them. There's just a lot of those sort of small stories, like artistic stories, that they're just, I think distributors in some cases sort of rightly recognize that they're not really going to pull in a bigger audience. So I say all that just to say that in regards to the 600, I saw like maybe one clip. Like I think Burton showed me one clip, and I was like, I'm in. It was really like I saw it and I was like, okay. I was like, this is one clip from the 600 hours. I was like, I'm in it. Let's do this. And that's what really makes this doc special, is the what is on tape is so good. It is so entertaining and unique, and like it's just like it's just incredible. I mean, we will reveal more things about it, but just the fact that this footage like exists at all in some cases is just wild.
It's
It's
funny
just
because at a certain point, I mean, because I'm a pretty weird guy, I just have to admit. But I at some point I was like, wait, people don't film everything? Like that's not I was like, that's not a normal thing that people do. Like I thought this is what a lot of people do. And um, I was working for a different post production company at the time, like kind of when this was all born. Um, like actually starting the process of digitizing. And the guy who was like the son of the owner of the post company slowly turned to me. He was like, after I explained some of the clips, he was like, "You're sitting on a gold mine," and I was like, "All right, well, I'm gonna put all my efforts into digitizing it." So yeah, it's just kind of good to get those kind of comments, from people where it's like, is this going to be worth it? You just got to be open to critique and opinions and things like that to kind of just see if it's even worth it. Because some people, I mean, I'll hear Micah talking to people sometimes, and they're like, "Oh, I got this project," and I'm listening to these people talking, and I'm like, "How can you think that that's a good idea?" I mean, maybe if it's written well, maybe, but just the premise itself has to be a good foundation for a good story. It can't just be, a guy is sad in LA, and it's like, okay, well, what's the story? And then they're like, oh, he plays music, and it's like, okay, but is there something traumatic that happens? Is there any kind of story
what's
arc?
unique about it?
Yeah, and I'm not sitting on a high horse saying that, this is going to be the best thing ever. But slowly over time, I'm realizing that it's going to be pretty good. um, I have a lot, there's so much story. And Elena actually asked, is it meant to be one feature length movie or a series? Let's see,
Yeah,
Micah?
so I mean, we clearly have enough footage to make a series, but I think basically our plan is, our plan is to make a feature, and I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the live. Sort of what our approach is, because I want to give you guys an idea of how we're creatively, focusing on it, because in some sense, like we're just going to have to be merciless with what we leave out, because there's well over 600 hours of footage and the final feature is only going to be 2 hours, maybe. So it's definitely something where we're only going to be able to include like less than 1% of the raw footage that we have, right? And so yeah, it's we could easily make this into a 20-part series and never really have any issue having footage for it. But I think for financial reasons, the best approach is to, since we've been able to raise the money to do it independently, the best thing is to do it as a feature. And at some point, I am going to soft pitch it to some people and see if they are interested in it, like the HBO Maxes, the Netflixes, and just be like, is this something that you're interested in jumping on board now, or not? And the thing with a lot of the streamers is, who are some of the bigger buyers of documentaries is, they sort of want to be involved early, and they tend to extend the length of things. They want it to be longer just because they want more viewable hours on their service, right? So, like, I think if you take like Making a Murder, they originally had 3 episodes or something, and then had been working on it for years. And then when they got connected with Netflix, Netflix was like, "How do you feel about 10 episodes?" Or whatever the final count was. So there tends to be a sort of lengthening of the TRT, the total runtime of a project, when a streamer gets involved and is sort of financing it. So we also want to just retain creative control. We want to make the feature version of this, really without any input. And at the same time, we are welcome to sort of, people's offers. And if they wanted to take it and make it a 3-part series, we could easily, or 6-part, we could really easily do that. And it would just be a slightly different beast. But yeah, the footage is like incredible, and we have a lot of it. So we have a lot of flexibility there. But I think because of the way that features are sold and feature documentaries are sold, we have more options if we do it as a feature length project rather than as a series. The feature sales world is just like more transactional than the TV series world is, where you really only have a handful of buyers. You really want, features you just sort of have more options with. This is one of the reasons why I see people trying to, bootstrap they're trying to do like a no budget TV series, like a narrative one. Like they'll be like, yeah, we're going to make 8 episodes of this TV series. And it's just like, that's so much time and effort, and nobody buys those. There's no buyers for your TV series at home, just none. So, um, making something that's feature length, whether it's a documentary or it's narrative, um, really has, it's just a lot easier to sell them when they're features versus TV series. So something else I'll say along those lines is, you know, I think that like the documentary feature is a really wonderful art form that's been corrupted a little bit by the streamer's approach. There tends to be a true crimification of the documentary space, and those just get so many ratings and so many eyeballs that that there's a tendency to move away from a more artistic approach to making those, and they tend to be a little predictable. And not that that's bad. I love those. Like, I absolutely love true crime docs, and um, it's something to where I have a problem. I watch them all the time. So, not bashing those, I love those, but they do tend to not really have an approach that's as cinematic. And if you go back, 20 years, there was just an enormous amount of integrity, and they are a bit samey. Elena's saying they're a little samey. So you know, this was
We're
just a
definitely
group,
going to have a good intro to ours, like similar to true crime, where it's just like,
like opening
you know,
titles.
a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of.
oh yeah, oh
I'm
yeah. We're gonna
kidding.
do
It's going to
something
be
fun.
good. It's just not going to be like every single documentary you see on the streamers
Correct, correct.
nowadays.
So yeah, there used to be a lot of artistic integrity, I think, in the documentary space, and each documentary is a little bit more of a bespoke piece of art with a unique approach. And so we are trying to do that. That is sort of our intent, is to do something that's a little less off the shelf, that stands out a little more, but is still wildly entertaining and is really going to stand out at a film festival or at whatever distributor ends up buying it. So yeah, let me see a couple other things we did this week. We opened the company, so there's all these old nuts and bolts you have to do. So we opened a company in Louisiana where we're going to be making this, and we are going to be applying for the Louisiana tax credits. So I'm going to be talking about that, the process there, and what that's like. Getting tax credits on a documentary is not something a lot of documentarians think about, but I can tell you that being able to cover 25% to maybe even 50% of your budget with a tax incentive is an enormous help in terms of getting in the black and actually making a profit on your project. So we are going to be doing that. We opened the company. Let's see. We talked about technical obstacles. All right. So let's talk about our first creative goal. Okay. So there's so much footage. There's over 600 hours. It's probably 700 at this point. Um, there's just so much. And how do you begin approaching that? It's so much that I don't think you can big brain approach. You can't like watch it all and then be like, okay, what's the story? So our approach to crafting the first draft of the screenplay, and yes, documentaries do have a screenplay, is we're going to do what we're calling like the first assembly. So essentially, just from talking to Burton, from knowing him really well, from knowing the type of documentary that he wants to make, um, I have come up with an idea that's like a core storyline that's going to allow us to organize all of it. But the question is how do you begin to organize it? How do you know like what's got to be in there, what's essential, and then what is inevitably going to be cut out later in the process? So um, we had this thing called the first assembly, and essentially we came up with this years ago. We just talked about it, and before we started even scanning the tapes, we just went through the tapes and talked about the things that are like, this absolutely has to be in there. This is like a gangbuster piece of footage that's got to be in there. This is a really incredible event that's got to be in there. And to an extent, I'm letting Burton be my guide on this. And a lot of this footage is footage I've watched, so I have a pretty good feel of like, oh yes, that's definitely got to be included, etc. So so we came up with this list that was probably 20 tapes overall, 25 tapes. So just the first assembly list of footage to review is like, it's a ton of stuff to review. But basically, I'm gonna watch it. Burton has scanned all of those tapes already, and we're gonna go through, and I'm going to watch each one and decide this is where I think it goes in our sort of projected 2 hour runtime. And so I'm just going to sort of mentally be like, it goes here, and then I'm going to literally write that in Final Draft with the tape number. And if it's something that I absolutely know is critical to the plot, the storyline of the documentary, then I'm going to actually go ahead and transcribe the dialogue, the section I think is absolutely essential. So I'm going to have this very rough script that's going to be probably end up being anywhere from 30 to 50 pages. That's going to have the essentials in it. And we're just sort of like making educated guesses about we're just sort of making educated guesses about what's going to fit, right, Burton? I mean, we don't really
Yeah.
know. So, some of it may end up getting cut out or may not fit. So there's so much that's going to end up being cut for time. It's hard to predict exactly what we're going to have to cut. So we're just trying to go through and make educated guesses, in some cases instinctual guesses about the things that I think are going to be helpful and the things that I think are going to be essential in terms of crafting like the story, right? So I'm literally just watching tapes on this list, making notes in Final Draft. Watching the tapes on this list. By the way, I'm not actually using Final Draft. I'm using Highland 2. That's sort of what we're doing, right? Is we're just kind of going back and forth. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to watch all this footage. I'm going to put all the stuff into Final Draft, and then we're going to take that footage, which is now digitized, and we're going to put it in um, into our NLE, our editing program, right? Which is going to be Adobe Premiere, right, Burton?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And we'll talk a little bit later about why that is our NLE of choice, even though it's one we don't really work in that often. But we're basically going to come up with an incredibly rough cut. We're just calling the first assembly, and we are going to just throw it all in there and then look at it and see if it kind of flows, if it kind of works, or if we need some big structural reorganization. Uh, and once we have that first assembly done, our next step is going to be to take it and to cut it down into a sizzle. So we're going to take it and cut it down into probably a 3 or 4 minute sales trailer or sales reel or whatever you want to call it. And essentially, it's just going to be a thing that is not public that we are going to use to show people. So I'm going to take it and show it to whoever I can, who I think can help us on this mission. I'm going to go to um, the streamers, the people that use docs, it's all that buy docs, and see if they have any interest in funding it directly. Not that we need them, but if it's a good fit and we find a great partner early, we're definitely willing to get in bed with one of these companies and let them be a part of that process. As long as they're allowing us to sort of tell a story we want to tell. And that's going to be some of the utility of the sizzle. It's also just going to be shorthand to let everybody know this is what it is, because it's not a true crime documentary. So it's not as easy as being like, hey, remember when Bill died? Here's the news story. Um, we're doing a true crime doc about Bill's death, right? So it's not going to
I mean,
be that.
there are news stories in it for sure. I mean,
Let's
yeah.
just say the BBC shows up at some point. So yeah, there's. I mean, it's just it is something that can be pitched, and I do have a pitch for the movie. So it is something that can be easily understood, but to see why it's unique, you have to see some of the footage, and the only way to do that is to like shock the hell out of people with like they're gonna see something and be like, "Oh, I haven't seen that before."
It's gonna be sizzling
um,
for sure.
it's gonna be sizzling. So, yeah, that's sort of our approach so far. We're just making our to-do lists and opening the companies and developing a plan. We expect to officially start essentially full time on it. Burton will be full time anyway. Um, if and when the strike happens, that'll be a nice, neat beginning that takes a lot of responsibilities off of his plate, probably puts a lot on mine. But that seems like a good time to start. And, if a strike happens, it may not happen. Of course, I think it's going to happen. So,
I think
yeah, so that's
someone
kind of what
said
we're doing.
earlier that they were stricken months ago. Let's see. Yeah, so
Stricken, what do you mean?
Someone said that they went on strike months
Well,
ago.
I'm talking about the writers' strike, the guild strikes.
Yeah, yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. So, yeah. What else? All right. So, you got anything else,
Oh,
Burton,
Elena.
before we do a little Q&A section?
Um, no, no. I think I'm just trying to get done with digitizing the tapes, just so I can just shift focus into splitting the files and getting deeper into the metadata and um, doing
Burton
more like
loves
the assistant
metadata.
editor. I do love metadata.
He's
It's
a
great.
big metadata guy.
If it were up to me, it would be like Tom Cruise and Minority Report, just taking all the footage and using Adobe Sensei to do it all. But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see, because I've never edited a documentary. Mike has never written a documentary, and this is a learning process for us. But we do have the skill sets necessary to complete it, and I'm very excited about it because I'm confused as to how he's going to put it all together. As a writer, I think it's going to be,
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think it's going to be tough.
one of the interesting places we have now is I have the story in my head essentially, and Burton doesn't know. He doesn't. He kind of knows, but like there's so much crossover between the footage and real life events and stuff that he's not 100% clear about how to crunch that down or tell that. I think we lost Burton. Here we go. He's back. So right now, creatively, we're not on the same page at all. This project exists in two different forms in two different places. One in Burton's head, one in my head, and that's why the first assembly, the first draft screenplay, is so important. It's so I can get what I think the documentary is out of my head and into an editing program, into a printable screenplay that we can look at and decide, oh, these problems are going to come up down the line. Let's not do that. Let's organize it this way. Let's do this, et cetera, et cetera. So it's very important. And it's going to be really fun. Like once we have the first assembly up, we're going to be like, oh, this is it. And this is what we have. And this is what we're missing that we might need to go get from somewhere or find in this, massive, 600 plus hour, treasure trove of footage. So it's going to be a lot of work. And we're going to try to do the vast majority of that work in about 6 months from whenever a strike happens, which it's going to happen. Come on. So, yeah. So, do you guys have any questions? Let's do a little Q&A. You can ask about the documentary, or you can just ask about filmmaking in general. I'm happy to answer any of your, film related questions or questions about this specific project if you would like to know more about it. I love how when I take a sip, my face disappears.
I think it's the same color as your wall or something. TikTok's like out.
Something like that. And also, it looks like I've had traumatic injury to my head. You know.
These will look better in the future and sound better.
So yeah, we want to share as much of this process as we can with you, and some footage we'll share as well at some points, but uh, we don't want it to become the process of vlogging this or vlogging it to become so much work that we don't want to do it, or we don't want to do it every week, or we would like to do a baseline of doing one live a week, and then beyond that, share even more. This is why we're setting up the 600 movie TikTok account, is we want people to see some of that process, any little snippet, even if it's just something boring like digitizing a tape, or just looking at the kind of equipment we're using, or et cetera, et cetera. So definitely follow that account up here if you haven't. the 600, please, please. We would love everybody to get there. We're going to start doing lives from that account too once we get to 1,000 followers. So please follow. That would be great. Does anybody have any questions about documentaries or filmmaking or producing or raising the money or any process questions, technical questions? Happy to answer that stuff, no matter how basic or advanced. We're willing to show you exactly how dumb we are. Um, cool. Let me scroll back up. Is there any questions I missed? I think I got most of Lena saying she went on strike.
So it's very like kid 90s.
There will be some 90s footage in it. Oh, cool. You teach documentary filmmaking students. Any advice I can relate for what to do when you graduate? Yeah, so the biggest piece of advice I can give to people who want to work in film is you have to understand it as an apprentice. It's an old school trade industry where there's a lot of institutional knowledge among professionals, and you need to try to get into the industry and apprentice yourself to those professionals. So, a lot of people go to film school or whatever, and they get all juiced up about directing and writing, and then as soon as they graduate, they realize, oh, I can't get those jobs yet. I've got to go do something else first before I can do that. So, it's important to understand that everybody basically starts at the very bottom. It doesn't matter if you are rich or poor or went to an Ivy League school or went to a community college or didn't go to college at all. Like, the film industry doesn't care if you got out of prison last week. They will hire you. They don't care. So the catch is everybody starts at the bottom. Everybody starts as a PA or an assistant or et cetera. And that's a good thing because that is how you become an apprentice. That's how you find somebody like me or producer Daniel or Burton who knows what they're doing, and maybe you're just an assistant, but you're there. Like, you're there, and you get to overhear their phone calls. You get to ask them questions. You get to see them practicing their trade, whatever that is, in whatever part of the industry you're in, and they teach it to you. Like, that's how the industry works. So it's not as much of a straightforward advancement as getting a job in tech, for instance, where you just become a programmer that knows Python or whatever and databases or whatever you're going to be good at, and then you can go and just look for those job descriptions throughout the film industry. That's not really how it works, especially at the beginning. You're looking for people that do this professionally, frequently, that really know what they're doing, you want to look for people that have actors in their movies that you recognize. Typically, if they're doing that, they're a pretty good person to sort of throw your hat in the ring with and learn as much as you can on the job. But the great thing about film is you don't need to go to school if you don't want to, or if you ended up going to school that didn't teach exactly what you wanted to do, the film industry will take you anyway. It's really not that hard to break in. It's just the caveat is you're not going to break in doing the thing you want as your ultimate career goal. You're not going to start directing right away. You're not going to start writing right away. You're going to be doing something else in the industry. But that's okay because you get to apprentice yourself to somebody else and learn from them and further sort of focus your goals and strategy. See, Elena says, I teach a lot of writers. It's hard to help them break into the industry because they see themselves as artists. Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on that. There's this idea that any amount of, buying, selling, employment, anything that are sort of features of the professional film industry, that somehow like corrupts people's art. And that's just not true. And it never has been. I mean, even, the great composers and the great painters, from back in the day, they had budgets. They had a canvas of a certain size. that they had to pay for. They had to select paints. They had to pay for the paints. So there's always an amount of money involved in and limitations. There's always financial limitations to whatever your art is, no matter what you're making. There's limitations. So if you are not approaching your career in film as somebody who is a professional, somebody who's in it to make money, somebody who's in it to make a living, then you're sort of missing a very essential part of what it means to be a filmmaker, because that's part and parcel of every aspect of the business, no matter what you're doing. And you can be an artist at the same time. You know, there are people that make very low budget movies and sell them, and they are incredible artistic works, even though they shot it on their iPhone. And then there's obviously people like, you know, David Fincher, who make movies for $100+ million, right? And they're, I challenge anybody to call him somebody who's not an artist. But Elena says, I tell my BA students they don't need to do a master's. So that's true. If you do go to film school or you go to college and you take some film classes, some screenwriting classes or whatever, the degree doesn't really mean anything. It's only the knowledge you get that is valuable. So you can go to film school or you can go to undergrad somewhere and gain knowledge that helps you, but the degree itself doesn't really carry any weight in the film industry. So that's okay. It's not saying you shouldn't go to college or shouldn't go to film school or whatever, um, but it's just saying you need to focus on acquiring knowledge and skills. Those are the things that are going to allow you to level up. Knowledge and skills. Knowledge allows you to be strategic about how you're building your career, and then the skills that you're acquiring allow other people to connect with you. It gives them a reason to reach out to you and to and to build a relationship with you, because they need your skill as an editor or your skill as a DP or your skill as a writer, right? Um, the biggest problem I see from people coming out of school is they think that they just have a very independent mindset, I would say, and they think that like um, they are good enough or they have the skills to sort of build their careers alone, and nobody builds their career alone. You have to work with other people. You have to build out your professional network. You don't need to be a nepo baby. You don't have to know anybody before you get in. I didn't know anybody. But you do have to work with others and build relationships and provide value to them, and they will in turn provide value to you. Any other questions? Feel free to drop them in the comments, and I'll just answer below. Anything dealing with the film industry or creating a documentary or selling documentaries, selling features. Happy to talk about that. Um, yeah, very welcome, Elena. Bert, you got anything you want to talk about while we're waiting for people to drop some questions?
Um, I guess, I guess, modesty, like not, I guess it kind of relates to what Elena was talking about. Just being, like not coming into the film industry and being like, I'm an artist and no one understands me but me. It's like you can be, you can think that way, but don't let people see you be that way when you're trying to work with other people, because you come off as someone that can't work with other people, and you come off as someone that isn't able to like adapt to other people's vision, because it's all about working together. um,
It is. It's all about working together, and literally everyone you meet has something to teach you. I really believe that. And the biggest people um, I know some very successful, very influential people in the film industry. And the thing I always appreciate about them is they are looking to learn from the new people that come into their orbit. They may know a lot about a certain thing, but when they come across you, they're looking, what is the thing that has made them successful? What is the thing that has allowed them to accomplish what they've accomplished? And even if they only learn one or two things from you, I mean, that could be something that is hugely powerful in their own careers. And, a good example of this is if you go look up Steven Spielberg talking about the Daniels and watching Everything Everywhere All at Once, he watched that movie and made comments in interviews where he was like, I'm trying to learn from them, and it's like hard to believe that Spielberg, who's had arguably the best career of any director ever, certainly in terms of the volume and the quality of that output, I mean, it's just who else has done that? He got started so young and he's still doing it. He's just been at the top of his game, making the best movies in the industry for years and years, right? So it's hard to understand how somebody who's been doing that long still has things to learn, but that's how he sees it. And when he sees very innovative filmmakers like the Daniels come along, like, how did they do that shot? How did they do this? How did they do that? So you should have that same approach. You should constantly be looking to make to make things and in the process learn things from the people you're collaborating with. It really is like the key to becoming a professional and becoming really good at things, right? Even knowing just a few things about your trade can make you radically better than other people who are doing a similar thing. So you don't know where those pieces of info are going to come from, but I can tell you they usually come from other people. They usually come from other people, or they come from incredibly painful mistakes that you have made and paid the price to learn. Um, and I've made some bad mistakes in my career. Like, I've made some stuff I really wouldn't have done the same way if I could do it again. And I learned some hard lessons from those mistakes. And I much prefer to listen to someone else and just have them tell it to me so I can avoid, those big mistakes, right? I don't want to have to, not only do I not want to make the mistakes I've made again, I don't want to make the mistake other people have made, right? Like, I want to constantly be, sort of optimizing and doing the smartest thing that allows me to create the best product for the money sort of that I have on that given project. Any other questions about the film industry or about making documentaries, or about how we're going to approach these lives? I'm willing to talk about pretty much anything. Look, I'm gone again. It's like my personal sneeze button. I just hold the cup up to my face. I'm gone. Burton, you got anything else?
No, I'm excited to continue. I'm trying to get
Oh
finished with
yeah,
these tapes.
we're so excited. Like, we're so pumped about this. It's going to be so much fun, and it's going to be very difficult not to share the goods with you early. So we are going to be sharing a lot of stuff, but it's going to be sort of outside of the center of what we're doing. So yeah, save up your questions. Like, if you want, follow at the 600 on the 600 movie on TikTok. That's where we're going to do the lives as soon as we get to 1,000 followers, and it's going to be great. So yeah, feel free to DM me on Instagram as well at It's Micah Haley if you have any questions, and we'll try to bring it up on the next live, which is going to happen next Sunday. So thanks everybody. We are going to be uploading these to YouTube after the fact, but I don't have all that set up yet. That's going to be a little bit down the line. So all right, Prince, it's been fun. Thanks, Burton.
See y'all later. Thank you.
Okay, have a good day. Bye.